butterflies when it comes to kind of some of this stuff. But I think things will work out perfectly fine. But Ellen had an issue at the last minute, and Deb Totsky, who is with us, okay, on audio, because we're having a little bit of technical issue from a video perspective, has so generously offered to fill in for Ellen. Okay. And
yes, I did.
And this is the first time that Deb and myself have worked together. So cut her some slack. Okay, that's for me. That's a message to me. Cut her some slack. Okay,
indeed.
As far as participation, and this should be an enjoyable program. This is a topic that I like, and I think Deb likes also, and it's things that we've talked about in the past. So I think it could work really well. And so we have a PowerPoint presentation here that we got about 25, 30 slides or whatever. We got some pictures, okay, included in this also. In fact, okay, let me go back up one. Okay, the goal of our presentation. We want to review the important steps from seed selection to placing the transplant in the garden, because that should be your goal. If you want to start seeds, your goal has to be to create a healthy seedling, or once that seed germinates, it turns into a seedling. And we want to create healthy seedlings that are able to be transplanted into the garden and be productive for us as we go throughout the growing season. So that's what we kind of want to accomplish today. But first of all, look at that place, Emmaus Grove. Ellen and I are the co-directors at the garden here down at Emmaus, and Deb is one of our staunchest participants and volunteers. This garden is, we're in our 8th or 9th year now, and it's attached to the Emmaus Soup Kitchen down on East 11th Street. And all of the produce that is generated out of this particular garden by about 12 to 15 volunteers goes to the soup kitchen and pantry there at Emmaus. And in some of our most productive years, we have generated 3,000 pounds of produce from this garden. So we garden rather intensively, and we have it arranged so that not only do we have volunteers that come down and help, but we also use it as an education site. We have students of Sister Pat Lupos come over from the art house. We have students from Piper Burley, which is directly across the street, come over on occasions. And sometimes even some adults come around on the weekends to see how we do things. Not that we do things correct all the time, because every single gardener, has a few problems each and every year. So, but I wanted you to know that that's kind of where we live in the summertime. And there's how things look as things get a little bit more productive. That's Ellen over there. She'd love that picture of herself. All right. And
she won't like that view.
And here's how our garden looks today. It's kind of barren, like everybody else's garden, even though the warm weather has kind of tempted us all to get out and get things going. But what we wanted to talk about today is getting these seeds started. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go real quick through 5 different slides to tell you the different points that we're going to address. We have it divided into 5 different sections. I'm going to go through it real quick, and then we're going to go back through these 5 points and kind of pick up on some detail. So planning is very important. We just don't want you to go off to the store, buy some seeds, you think I'm going to do this, this, and this. No, you got to put in a little bit more effort into it than that, and we'll talk about that. Some of the important factors to start seeds: light, temperature, soil, and the containers that you use, along with the moisture. The equipment that you use. What equipment do you need to accomplish the objectives that we just addressed? The growing process, planting, and the day-to-day care. What do you need to be observant for? And hardening off. That is preparing the plants for being planted in the garden. Some people miss this last step. After they've been growing things in the house, they think they can immediately take them outside on a nice, bright, sunshiny day and pop them in the garden. Well, your babies need to be cared for a little bit better than that before you expose them to the elements. So getting back to planning, Deb,
Yes.
why do people want to start seeds indoors anyways?
Well, a lot of people, it's like a hobby for them. They enjoy planting the seeds and watching them germinate. So it's also, you can plant seeds for things that are hard to find in the regular different
Garden stores.
garden centers. That's what left my mind there. But and you can also plant heirloom seeds too, because sometimes heirlooms are hard to purchase locally. So, but it's an enjoyable thing for a lot of people.
You're right, and there's a wide variety of things, okay, in the catalogs and even at the stores, where you're confronted. Say you go up to Lowe's or you go out to Gerlax, and you look at all the seeds that they got. And go, oh wow, yeah, some of this, some of that, whatever. I can start all those things, but you won't necessarily find those, growing in trays, at their outside displays. So growing seeds, indoors really kind of opens up a whole new world of opportunities for you as far as the types of plants. But, okay, everything doesn't necessarily do well if it's started indoors. And we're going to try to look at this from primarily a vegetable garden perspective. And things that do well that are started indoors, once they transfer outside, are your tomatoes, your peppers, eggplants, herbs, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, things like that. And then there's some things jump down to where the ones that are difficult. Peas and beans, spinach, corn, potatoes, radishes, carrots, beets, and other root crops. They don't seem to transition well from being grown inside to being planted in the garden. If you ask me why, I'm going to tell you I don't know. And I'm not sure that I've ever seen any place that has explained why some of these things don't seem to manage that transition from being sheltered indoor growing space to the outside in the elements. So we're just going to have to deal with that. So, if you're thinking of planting things inside, stay away from that last group that's difficult. Try not to plant your peas and your beans and other things like that on the inside. It's going to be a struggle to get them to transition outside and be productive for you. Then there's things in the middle there where it says variable, cucumbers and the squash and the zucchini and things like that. If you got some experience under your belt, okay, as far as a gardener, as far as starting seeds, okay, you can do that. But some of these things in this middle category do really well direct seeding into the garden. It's rare that I would do anything other than direct seed my cucumbers or my squash or zucchini or pumpkins or winter squash, even lettuce and other greens. I put those right into the garden. I don't bother with trying to start them on the inside. Versus the things in the first category that do well, the tomatoes and the peppers, things like that, and the herbs, they need a little bit of a head start. Because by the time, the weather warms up for these particular crops, I like to have a plant that's got 2 or 3 inches on it, as opposed to starting directly from seed and maybe delaying my harvesting for 2 or 3 weeks downstream into from July into August, etc. So be selective about what you're trying to start, especially if you're new to the game. So, Deb, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you are new to the game, I would stick with the seeds that do well. Otherwise, I think it's very frustrating if you try to grow the more difficult or variable ones. If you don't get a good result, you want to be happy with what you're going to plant. So I would stick with the do well seeds if I were brand new.
Yeah, we're trying to get you to the point where to understand that gardening is not difficult at all. It doesn't have to be difficult. So be careful with what you're trying to bite off initially. Okay. Also, as far as planting is concerned, you can just about get any kind of seeds to germinate indoors. But the issue is growing healthy seedlings and getting those plants to the point where you can transition them to the outside, and so that they'll do well and be productive in your garden. And that's what we kind of want to zero in on today. How do you get to that particular point? Because I've seen a lot of seeds that had been started inside, a lot of seedlings that were started inside. And, I knew just by looking at them that they don't stand a chance outside. I'm, and I've talked with that about those individuals. Okay, so to try to do a little bit better, try to be a little bit more selective on some of the things. So some of the key factors. Deb, you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I was going to say, you're going to talk a lot about light. That's a very important factor on growing seedlings. You have to have the right kind of light, once you do have your lighting set, you want it so it'll be conducive to the seedlings growing. And you also want to have an even temperature for your seedlings also. You don't want it real cold because they won't germinate, and you don't want it real warm. So just like it is, the temps are above 60 degrees, and mid 70s are the best goal. But there's ways to get to those temperatures, as we're going to talk further on, if you don't have that warmth in the place where you want to grow your seedlings.
Yeah, Deb, thank you for emphasizing that. I mean, those things are so very important, and they're hard to achieve on the inside of a house. I mean, we all keep our homes at different temperatures. We let our house creep way down into the mid 50s at night, which would not be very conducive to growing seedlings without some supplemental heat. And I certainly don't have any kind of a place inside my house near a window, okay, that could facilitate this process either. But again, we're going to bring up some equipment issues. The soil and the containers. I'm a big advocate for this. Okay, the good root structure of a plant, of a seedling, is so very, very important. And to develop a good root structure, you need a little bit of room in that container that you're using, and you need a good growing medium. And it doesn't have to be, a seed starting medium. It can be something else, and we're going to get to that. But the roots are so very, very important. That's primarily what's going to determine, that transition and how healthy and productive that plant is. And you don't want root-bound transplants either. So you really don't want to start too early. You've all purchased things at the nursery, the plant nursery, and you pull them out of the pot, and the outside's all white. Okay, all that circular root growth that you see. Then you have to, if you're going to do it right, you got to break all that up. You got to push your thumbs into the bottom of it, and every time I do that, okay, some of the people cringe how I just destroy that root structure and pull it all apart. But you got to get those roots growing in an outward direction. That's why you want, when you're starting seeds inside, you want to give them some room to grow, so you don't get a lot of that circular growth pattern. So that container size and that growing medium are important. Well, look what we got there, Deb. You didn't see that before, did you?
No, I didn't. That's very nice.
Look at some radishes. Okay, I wanted to just emphasize, the importance of these seedlings. These are started outside, obviously, and and they're doing very well. And here's something else that we use extensively that we throw in the ground outside, and we do this in the fall, and that's for another time, I guess. But this is annual rye grass, winter rye, and we use a lot of that to add nutrients to the soil and a lot of biological activity and maintain that over the winter months, etc. Something like that. So just wanted to put a little color into the thing.
That's good.
What about, from an equipment perspective, equipment and supplies? What about this light again, Debbie? That what you said, it's so very, very important, and we're going to kind of keep coming back to that and hammering it, aren't we?
Yeah, the light is so important for the growth of the seedlings. You can't just put your seedlings on a windowsill and expect the light from the outside to be enough for them. They have to have supplemental light. And as you have there, the grow lights are nice, but they aren't necessary. And fluorescent lights are okay too, but LEDs are pretty much easier to deal with, and they work just as well. And they're a little bit cheaper too.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I've been starting seeds indoors for a long time. I remember working with my dad years ago when we used to do it, you know, when we were kids. And you know, you don't necessarily need grow lights. These fluorescent shop lights are perfectly fine. You get light from those in the blue range of the light spectrum, you know, which is fine for vegetative growth. And that's what we're doing. Now, if you're trying to grow African violets or other plants on the inside, and you want them to blossom, you need something other than that blue light. You need something full spectrum like these grow lights. But the LEDs, I'm gradually switching to all my lighting to LEDs. Number one, they're not very expensive, and number two, they're cheap to operate, and boy, you get a lot of light out of those things. So if I was going to encourage anybody to select lights, please take a look at the LED fixtures. I picked up a couple of LED fixtures, okay, at the local hardware store, you know, when they were on sale for they're $12 a piece, and they had the cord with them and everything. Versus the shop lights, you got to buy the cord separately, and you know, and the bulbs separately and stuff like that. And it'll get you up around $40 a piece. But you got to have that supplemental light.
Mike, I have a question. This is Chris.
Oh, Chris, hello there. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I was wondering about the inexpensive LED lights, because every time I see somebody on television talking about the LED lights, they're using these fancy, expensive ones. And of course, I used to use the shop lights. And then last year I bought the inexpensive LED lights, and but I was mostly I was moving my tomatoes around to all the windows every day. And so I'm not really sure if the LED lights worked. Have you actually used them in previous years?
Yes.
On tomatoes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
I have, and they work fine. So, you know, but we'll say a little bit more about that a little bit later. I mean, a lot of it has to do with how close you keep these LEDs or any lights to the plants.
Sure.
So, but there's my setup. You can see it's made of PVC and piping, 3/4 inch, and it's a little structure to hang the lights from. And I have it so that the lights, you know, can be adjusted height-wise, because what I do is I keep the lights very close to my plants, within a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of the plants. And because what you want to do, you want to create a seedling that is short and stocky. You don't want it to get tall, because, you know, when you place it outside, you want something that's tough. Short and stocky is tough. Tall is going to be wobble on you. It's not going to be very strong. And sometimes I even let my plants grow into the lights. It wouldn't be unusual to come to my house and take a look and say, okay, the leaves on your plants, on your seedlings, are actually touching the lights. That's correct, they are. And I keep trying to push them down, okay, if you will, okay, through that process. Okay, there's my fluorescent fixtures that I, you know, again, trying to get away from, but they work fine. I mean, if you have them, that's great. There it is, the 3/4 inch, you know, PVC that I use. There's a little bit of an angle piece that I purchased up at Lowe's, and there's the T-piece that I use at the bottom, okay, to kind of hold things together and stuff like that. So those of us who grew up with Tinker Toys, and there's a couple of us out there, okay, we get into this kind of stuff. And then there's the LED fixtures again. But some of us out there remember Tinker Toys. But Deb, when you look for signs of inadequate light, what are we going to find?
Well, you're going to find your seedlings are going to be kind of spindly, and they're going to get elongated, and they're going to bend toward whatever source of light they can find.
Yeah, you're
So
right.
it's best to keep that light, like you said, almost right on top of your plant, your seedlings, because you want them to grow upright and have a good root system.
Now, I mentioned that it's almost impossible to grow some of these seedlings in your windows, but Chris does it. Okay.
I heard that,
You
yes.
know, and
I'm
that's one of-
retired. I have time.
Okay.
Oh, okay, okay.
It's not easy. Okay. You got to put a lot of time into it. And I personally like to, give them light for a longer period of time. My plants are under the lights for about 14 hours a day. And little inexpensive timers work well for that. Heating. Those heating pads are great that they make for heating or germination pads. I bought some a number of years back, and I'm still using the very same ones. Okay? They really work nice. And I like to keep that temperature in that 60 to 75 degree range, especially, for peppers a little bit higher, around 75. Not that these are just adjustable, but they'll give you heat like that. Heat in that particular range.
Is it necessary, Mike, to have the germinate heat pads or?
Well, again, it all depends upon what your environment is like at home. If you got a cool house, you keep your home relatively cool, you're going to struggle. And what you want to do, the longer these seeds sit in a cool, moist soil, it decreases the chances of germination because they're going to mold.
Okay.
So giving them a little bit of heat to encourage that germination, so they get up and get up and out of the ground, if you will, okay, and start growing. That's what you want to accomplish. And there's different ways of doing this. Okay, you can be innovative. You don't have to buy the heating pads, even though they are available at the local garden stores, and they're not that pricey.
Okay.
But don't use these medical heating pads. Okay, they're not designed for that, to be run long periods of time, underneath the tray, etc., and stuff like that. Don't try to do that. You might cause a little problem for yourself. But I've even done, silly things like save milk containers, okay, and fill them up with warm water and place those underneath my seedling trays somehow. And you'd be surprised what that does. That works. Now you got to change it a couple times a day, but that's okay. In fact, I even mentioned to did I mention this the other day about how I started some tomato plants?
Yeah, that's interesting. You should tell them about that. I'd like that.
Okay, I got the tomato seeds to germinate in 2 days. Okay, and what I did is I took my seeds, okay, and I took a paper towel and I cut the paper towel into about 1/4-inch squares, one seed on each square. Because what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to separate these seedlings. And if you put them in a pile, the roots will all grow together, and then you have a mess, and you're going to destroy most of them. But then after you have that plate like that, moisten it, and I put enough water on it, put a piece of cellophane over it, and then I put it in a cooler, and I put it in there with a couple of jugs of hot water, and close it up. I don't use light in that particular situation. And then within 2 days, these seeds are germinating. And then what I do then is take it out. I take the 1/4-inch paper towel square that I did. I plant that and the seed together in the soil. So there's all kinds of different ways of doing things. Don't be afraid to be innovative or try something a little bit different. There's that heating pad I use. I actually took a picture of it. Okay. So,
Very nice.
And these work fine. There's a little bit of a close up. Okay. And I got a lot of reflection out of that, but whatever. Okay. Equipment, soil. Yeah. What about soil?
Well, the soil is very important. You really don't want to try to use soil from your garden or from your yard, because that has might have a lot of disease or bugs or fungus in it, and it'll get kind of brittle and hard. So it's preferably you'd want to get a decent commercial potting soil. You don't really need the seed starting medium. Regular potting soil works. I don't know, as far as making your own, if it's worth it, it may not. I think you might get mixed results unless you're really sure of what you're doing. But I think I would stick with the commercial potting soil. It's not that expensive.
Yeah. I mean, in addition to the bacteria and the fungi and stuff like that, the disease in that soil from the yard, you're also going to get some weed seeds probably. And,
That's true.
You know, you don't need that kind of competition for your plants. I invest in a bag of commercial potting soil that's got a lot of peat moss in it, vermiculite and perlite, etc. Excuse me, which is nice and fluffy. You want to keep that soil from crusting over. You don't want that to happen. So be careful with that. And do I bother with these commercial seeds starting things? No, I don't. You get a little bag for $6 or $7 and it doesn't go very far. And, I don't bother with that. Can you tell?
Mike, do you mind if I interrupt you for a second?
What's that?
Do you mind if I interrupt for a second?
No, please do.
So I wanted to let you know in the beginning, we had somebody who asked if you have handouts for the group.
No.
If not, that's fine. If you have them, then I'm happy to send them out to everybody. I also wanted to make note that someone put something in the comments that they appreciate the list that you had in the beginning because it explains why their pumpkins and squash never grew. So much appreciation. And then we had one new person come in, and I just wanted to make sure that they know that we are recording today's session.
Okay, very good. No, I do not have handouts. Sorry, I didn't think of doing that. I should have. Okay, so shame on me. So next time around, okay, I'll think of that. But here's the potting soil that I use for starting my seeds and growing my seedlings. It's just, can you see the top of that? I think it's Miracle Grow potting mix. Works fine. You can get a big bag like this. There's 56 quarts or something like that. And, it's for about $12. Works fine. I've been using it for a number of years. So you don't need to buy the real pricey stuff. What about the equipment, the containers? Deb, they need to be clean, don't they?
Yes, those containers need to be clean or you're going to have a problem with your seedlings. And you also want to make sure there's enough drainage to your containers too, because you want your roots to grow well. You don't want them to get too wet. If there's not enough drainage, your roots are going to rot when you water them. And on the other hand, you don't want it to be drying out too quickly either. So, and you also don't want your seedlings to become root bound too. So
yeah, those are good points. And and there's a picture of the size of the container that I like to use. You can see that this is just a little bit better than a 2-inch square. And it's about that deep also. And I fill these containers to the top. I've seen some people, they get a container this size and they put 3/4 of an inch of growing medium in it. Well, the roots need room to grow and to expand and to take up minerals, to take up moisture, to gather some oxygen because they need the air also. So I like to do this. Is this a little bit overkill? Maybe, but just like you said, Deb, when I have a larger container like this, it's easier to keep the soil moist, evenly moist. Don't make it soggy. If you're going to make it soggy, okay, you're courting disaster. It's not going to happen. The seeds aren't going to grow. So if you put too much water, into one of these trays, I always take trays like growing trays like this and put them in a larger tray that does not have holes in it. If you need to, pick the growing trays up out of it, dump the water out of the bigger one, because it's not going to evaporate on you. Okay, it's going to cause a problem. And you can see there's drainage holes in the bottoms of all these little containers. So this particular flat that I'm using here, in fact, the master gardeners are growing some seedlings, vegetable seedlings for some of the pantries this year. We are not allowed to have our plant sale this year again because of COVID. So we figured, well, we got to do something for the community. And maybe the individuals who come to the pantries would appreciate, you know, a 4-pack of tomatoes or peppers or a combination of things, etc. So we're growing about 60 flats, all right, of vegetable plants to give away. And the folks out at the Regional Science Consortium, the greenhouse at Trek there, are gracious enough to allow us to use some of their space to grow some of those. But but in addition to that, some of the master gardeners are taking 5, 6, 8 trays on their own, you know, and growing things for this distribution to the pantries also. So that's kind of a nice thing that we're trying to do this year to see. We've gotten a lot of takers, probably more than we expected to get. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm glad that, you know, people appreciate the fact that, you know, this will work for them. So don't cheat on this particular aspect. I mean, you can start your seeds in a closer environment if you want, yeah, but you know, once they get that first set of leaves, you got to start transplanting them. And I would always transplant them into something like this. Oh, wrong way. Okay. The environment, good airflow. It's important, isn't it, Deb?
Yes, it is. Yeah, they need the good airflow. You don't want to have it so warm it'll cook them, and too cool won't work either. So
no, and that airflow helps with, you know, keeping the temperature steady. It helps with controlling a fungal growth on top of the soil, and which is very, very important. That's called damping off. What you don't want to have is, if you've gone through all of this effort to put this together and planted your seeds and started them, and they start to grow, and then they start to fall over on you because of a fungal disease, because you had too much moisture in the soil. You got to be careful about that. And you can help with that by using a small oscillating fan if you like. But it all depends upon the environment that you have. Do I use a small oscillating fan here at my house? No, I don't. And I don't seem to have a problem with damping off, knock on wood. You know, so, but my room where I usually grow this is a spare bedroom. Kids are gone now, right? Okay, you got to put their bedroom to some kind of use. We can grow some things in there. So not there wasn't things growing in there anyway. So, but you know, if you got good airflow, good temperatures, you know, it can work. You know, and I close that room up, so I use the heating pad, so it keeps that room a little bit warmer than the rest of the house. Planting, germinating, growing. Deb,
yes.
what's about looking at the seed packet? You know, I got to read.
Yes, you do. You got to look at your seed packet. In fact, I have one here with me. It's for tomatoes. And on the back of your packet, it will tell you what depth and how you're spacing your seeds when you're starting them, and days to germination. And now what I have here is Rutgers tomato. So it's telling me that it's going to take 8 to 14 days to germinate. So I'm going to have to decide how soon to plant the seeds in order to get them outside, harden them off to go outside.
Okay, and does it mention anything about plant X number of weeks prior to the last frost or something?
I'm sorry, yes. No, it doesn't.
Okay, some of the seed packets do that, okay? It talks about if starting them indoors, start X number of weeks prior to your last frost. And you need to pay attention to that because we have cool weather crops and we have warm weather crops. The cool weather crops are your things like your broccolis and your cabbage and your cauliflower, you know, and spinach and lettuces we talked about, not starting those on the inside anyways. But the the broccoli and the cauliflower and the cabbage, you can put them out in the latter part of April or the first part of May. So you can probably start those a little bit earlier than you started your warm weather crops. So you got to take a look at the calendar. You got to count backwards, and you got to make a decision. Okay, is this a cool weather crop or warm weather crop? And you got to go back from that particular period of time, because that's especially important with the warm weather crops. Okay, so a tomato, typically they'll tell you, 5 or 6 weeks, before, no, it's a little bit longer than that. Excuse me, 6 to 8 weeks prior to your last frost. So our last frost here in the Erie area anyways, is somewhere around the, 7th or 10th of May, even though this year it looks like it's going to be a freaky kind of a time, isn't it? Even though, we could go back to winter without a problem, couldn't we? We've done stuff like that.
Yes, we could, yeah.
So you got to kind of but you got to kind of hang in there with that, last day of frost, in the first part of May here in the Erie area, and it's certainly inland, and sometimes it's even later than that, and count back from that. Some people, they say, well, if you don't have your tomato plants started, by mid-February, you might as well throw in the towel. It's not going to work. That's wrong. Okay. Count back from, the middle of May. Okay. So you're looking at the first part of April, maybe, when it's a good time to plant your tomatoes. So right now is probably a decent time if you're going to start the season indoors on tomatoes. You don't have to. The tomatoes, when you set them outside, they're not going to grow until the soil warms up, not the air, the soil. And even last weekend, I remember we had a couple of cold nights here. I went out in the morning, and in my backyard, the ground was as hard as a rock. The ground was still frozen, despite the fact that we had some very warm weather during the course of the day. So you gotta think about that. And if you put these warm weather crops in the ground when the soil is too cold, they're just going to sit there. They're not going to grow. They're going to be subject to disease and insects and other kinds of problems. So don't rush it. In fact, one year, I told Ellen, I said, what I'm going to do is, I don't believe any of this, I'm going to start my tomato seeds. And so I took some tomato seeds and I put them in a container on my back patio on the 16th of June. Tomato seeds, put them in there. And granted, it was a nice environment. The soil was nice and warm by that time. And, first part of September, we had tomatoes off of those plants. So things will grow. Granted, most people don't want to wait until the first part of September, but still, it gives you an idea that don't give up on the idea that it's too late to start some things. It's not. It might be too early. I would never start my zucchini or my summer squash or my cucumbers right now if I was doing it inside, because where am I going to, 5 or 6 weeks, they're going to be ready to go outside. But guess what? The soil's going to be too cold for them. And we're still going to have frost, and that frost is going to kill those plants. I guess I'm digressing here. So, okay. The other thing is, when it comes to planting, initially, I moisten the soil from above. But once those plants have that first set of leaves on them, I start moistening them from underneath. I want to try to keep the top of the soil dry once the plants are growing. And when it's just seed, I have a little small watering pot that I very, very gently place water on the top of that soil where the seeds are. And and then with the added warmth and a little bit of warmth from the light too, not very much, that soil on top will dry out a little bit. But you have to be careful to allow those seedlings to dry out. Early on, those roots are so very, very tender, and the little root hairs on those things, if they dry up, the plants are going to die. So it's a funny balance that you have to kind of maintain. But once you've done it a couple of times, it's so easy. Okay, germination.
There's that light again,
There's
Mike.
that light again.
Yes, yes.
Yes, that we keep talking about, because that seems to be the biggest mistake that people make. Okay, not giving the plants enough light to allow them to stretch out and become weak. So, like I use my artificial lights for 14 hours per day. I keep that soil lightly moist, and I maintain those temperatures 60 to 75. And then you got to kind of watch for germinate, because all those seeds won't germinate at the same time, will they, Deb?
No, they won't.
Okay.
They won't.
Okay. Especially peppers. They seem to be, stubborn like that. I last year when we were growing plants for our plant sale that eventually got canceled, we started things out at the greenhouse at the Regional Science Consortium. And then one of the members out there, Jen Salem, she calls me, she says, we have to close the greenhouse. You have to take your trays out of here. I go, where am I going to put them? Because we had about 10 trays of peppers already started and tomatoes. She says, well, I guess, I don't know. She says, I got to take mine to my house. Okay, I got to do it in my garage. Because she had a bunch of stuff started also for Prescott. So we both struggled. But, I got them home and I ended up planting some more peppers at home also. But so I watched them real closely and there was quite a variability in peppers. Some of them would pop up in, a week. Some of them took, 20 days. So I kept nursing them along and lo and behold, they showed up. So, pay attention to that, keep that in mind. Don't give up on some of those seeds. Keep the soil moist and keep that light close and you'll be fine.
So we have another question. Is now a good time?
Yes.
All right, so it looks like one of our participants is a little apprehensive about using plastics and about their carbon footprint. Can you suggest some soilless growing mediums that they could maybe use to start seeds with?
You mean a container? You said you were concerned about the plastics.
They're concerned about plastic and also the carbon footprint that can be created by some of the other products such as peat moss, vermiculite, and perlite. Yeah, so they asked if you could suggest some other soilless growing mediums that they could use to start seeds. And you can pipe up if you wanted to make your question more clear than I am.
I guess my answer to that is, can I think of anything? My answer is no, I cannot. Okay. You could probably, you can mix some of your own. You can use. Okay, here am I going to violate one of my principles, aren't I? Okay, if you want to, you could probably take some garden soil, okay, and then you might want to spread it out and dry it out. You might want to heat it even in an oven to kill some of the weed seeds and kill some of the bacteria and the funguses, and then take that soil. I can't get around the peat moss though, okay, which is a naturally occurring substance, which is, gets renewed. Or you could also probably take some straw, or you can take some leaves and grind them up very, very thoroughly and use them as a substitute for the peat moss. Do it that way. And as far as containers, okay, trying to stay away from plastic. Some people roll newspaper. And in fact, there's a tool out there that you can use to create a little pot out of newspaper, or you can you can wrap newspaper tightly around any particular round, or it doesn't have to be round; it can be square. Okay, piece of wood, okay, and pull it tight and get it to keep that shape by giving a little bit of moisture and then kind of putting them close together so they hold things, so they hold each other together. And you can do it that way. I have not used that. I think that I reuse these plastic containers, okay, the ones that I have here at home. Some of these things are good for a number of years. And I would encourage everybody to do that, okay? To get the plants out of them, you don't have to squeeze them and destroy them. Okay, you can simply, put a sharp object down in there and kind of lift that seed pod out of there, lift that plant out of that container. But if you do it right, and you take care and consideration about the bacteria and the funguses and the weed seeds, yeah, you can take some garden soil, you can take some straw, you can chew it up really good, and the leaf material, etc., and make something that's going to stay friable, stay nice and loose, so those plants can grow. I hope that answers your question. Okay?
She said thank you. Oh, it looks like we have another one. You mentioned peat moss a few times. Can you explain best uses for it? I have a large package of it and I'm not sure how best to use it.
Okay, you're right. And what I do, okay, with the peat moss, if I have a bag of that around that I have and want to get it back into, I like to get it back into the earth, so where it belongs. And when I plant my seeds, direct seeds, I plant seeds directly into the garden soil. Okay, I will take a little bit of garden soil, mix it with the peat moss, okay, and put that over the top of the seeds to keep that soil from getting crusty on the top. Because I have some clay where I garden, but I found that if I can take some of that peat moss and just mix it thoroughly with some soil, I get better germination from my seeds. The seeds come up through that soil a little bit better. So that's one good use for it. Anything else, Friendly?
She said thank you as well. So I think we're good on questions at the moment.
So growing, germinating, okay. Deb, what's that first one?
Keep your light close. We need that light at beginning and ending of this one.
Yeah, you're right.
Very important.
Very, very important. And again, transition that water from top to the base of the container as the plants grow. You need some good air circulation. Eliminating that heating pad if the room temperature is reasonable once those plants have started to grow. Because what the heating pad does, in addition to kind of helps the seeds germinate, it also helps the moisture evaporate. And you get to the point where you need to find some kind of a balance. And if you got a decent temperature, in the room, that doesn't drop down below 60 at night, you're probably in good shape for growing all those seedlings. Hardening off. I suspect that some people don't even actually know what that is. And Deb, you can't take these babies and just throw them to the wild, can you?
No, you can't. Your
Throw 'em to the
little
elements.
seedlings are like babies. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they are. You don't take a newborn to the beach, do you?
No, and don't leave them out in the sun, do we?
No, because they are very tender, okay? And your plants are very tender. And the leaves actually of seedlings that are grown inside, they lack a protective coating on their leaves called cutin. But you can condition those plants by gradually exposing them to the sun and the wind and the temperature, okay, so that they generate that cutin so that they can, tolerate those outdoor conditions. And that's exactly what the purpose of that cutin is. It kind of keeps the leaves hydrated, okay, helps them to withstand the rigors of outside, the intense sun, the blowing wind, and the temperature fluctuations. So it's very important. But it takes a little bit of time to do that. Yeah, I put down here it takes 6 to 10 days to develop this cutin layer. It can happen certainly quicker than that. Sometimes as easy as 4. But how do you go about accomplishing it? Now, first of all, don't get too fussy about my, description here. I wanted to put something down, and I used something similar to this. It might not be exactly this, And again, it depends upon, what I think the plants will tolerate, the temperature for the day, the air, the breeze, and things like that. But I want to get that gradual exposure. So I don't start taking them out to the temps outside are about 55 degrees. Then on day 1, 2 or 3 hours in the shade, just to have them relax. Next day 2, 3 to 5 in that same shade. Where do you find shade this time of year? Probably not under a tree because there's no leaves, but certainly in the back of the house, etc., and stuff like that. Then I bring these trays in at night. The other thing that you have to be careful of, if you put them out and you set them on your grass, okay, those things could disappear. Chipmunks, birds, rabbits, etc., going to love this meal that you're presenting them with, wouldn't they, Deb? Okay. Then on day 3, maybe some 3 hours and then some filtered sunlight. Same with the 4th. I kick it up a little bit. And then I keep evaluating the things. Okay. And if it's doesn't look like it's going real well, I kind of back off. How do you tell whether it's not going real well? Well, if the leaves are turning a little bit yellow, okay, they're getting a little bit too much sun, or if they're turning brown around the edges, that means they're drying out. And you got to remember that, once you start setting these things out and you have them in a cell, a growing cell that's too small, boy, those plants are going to dry that stuff out in a hurry. That wind is going to come by and it's going to, pull a lot of moisture off those leaf surfaces, and the roots are in turn going to pull a lot of moisture out of that soil. And pretty soon you're going to have a wilting plant. If your plants wilt, give them some moisture and get them out of the sun. They'll pop back for you if they haven't gone too far. So on day 5, couple hours in the full sun. Day 6, I bump it up. If all is well, I proceed with planting. And sometimes I don't even take the 6 days. Sometimes I'll shorten it to 4. But I just remember, we helped some of the school gardens, and nursing plants, seedlings along in a school classroom is really tough because there's days off, there's weekends, there's all kinds of things, and there's other activities and things get forgotten. The kids sometimes they would take the plants out in the morning to start the hardening off process, and they'll forget about it. Next day they go, "Where's the plants?" Well, they're still outside. You go outside and look at them, and well, I guess we have to start over, okay? Because this does not look good. Okay, they will, wither on you that quickly if you're not careful. Especially if you get some extreme temperatures or you get some real intense sun. So it's just it's an art really of doing that. And again, you got to kind of keep them away from the creatures. Bring them in at night and modify your plan if need be. And again, that's a gradual introduction to the outside. And if you can plant them on a cool day, a cloudy day, that's even better. Okay, so an overview. With all that said, it comes down to light. It comes down to soil, which I forgot to put there. Okay, it comes down to water, and it comes down to warmth. And then that gradual introduction to the outside. Then, why did I put this here? This is my last slide. Our last slide. This is Bok Choy. And you know what? I put this in because I wanted to remind everybody, after you're done with your seed trays in the spring, don't bury them someplace, in the basement or the garage, etc. Keep them handy and start some fall crops, okay, the first part of August or so. Bok Choy loves cooler weather. This stuff is great. We do this at the Emmaus Garden, and the clients there, okay, they love this stuff. Okay, in fact, we have to have them slap the hands of the volunteers to keep them from taking them too. So but you can start a lot of things in the fall, towards the fall for fall crops. You can start some broccoli, you can start some cauliflower, you can start some greens like this, things like that. And you can use those containers. And once you learn how to do this, you can cheat the system a little bit too. You can learn how to do that and say, yeah, I know these guys on way back here, they said that I couldn't really grow these things in these difficult things, but you know what? I'm going to try it anyways. Okay, and you might be lucky. You might work. Some people are very innovative. If you think like a plant, okay, think about what the plant needs. It could work really well. But again, don't make it difficult. Light, keep it close, right there. Is that the word?
Very close. Yes. Yes. Light, light, light.
And a good growing medium. Keep the soil moist, not wet, just moist or damp. Okay, and keep things reasonably warm, especially as you're trying to get them to germinate. And once they germinate, you can back off on the temperature a little bit, as long as you don't let it drop down below 60. I don't like to anyways. But there's a lot of different ways to grow and to start seeds. There's some things that are wrong that aren't going to work, but a lot of different things will work. And what we tried to present today was a way that will work for you, and tried to provide a little bit of an explanation. So I hope that helps. Deb, thank you for your help. Okay,
Well,
coming in
thank
on
you.
short notice, and getting involved here.
Not a
Annalena, do we
problem.
have any more questions?
I'm actually going to stop recording now.